This is the next video, and all we really need to talk about for this video is the rules for naming covalent compounds. So naming a covalent compound or writing a formula if you're provided a name. The one thing I'll caution you against with naming, for naming covalent compounds, the rules is really easy. It's very simple, but when you're naming an ionic compound, it's a little more complex. So when we get further along in the year, don't use covalent naming rules all the time just because they're easy. You have to be able to look at a compound and determine whether or not it's covalent before you can apply the covalent naming rules. And if you watch the first video, the easiest way to look at a compound and know whether or not it's covalent is if it only has nonmetals. So if there are only nonmetals in the compound, then you know it's okay to use the covalent naming rules. If there is a metal in the compound, it is not okay to use the covalent naming rules. So the main thing I need to refresh your memory on before I give you some examples, because this is pretty simple, are your prefixes. And what I mean by that is prefixes for numbers. So we only have to go through the number 10. So the prefix that you need to use for the number 1 is mono. The prefix for number 2 is di. Tri for 3. Tetra for 4. Penta. Hexa. Septa, octa, nona, and deca. So when we're naming covalent compounds, we use prefixes to let us know how many of a particular atom is present. And really the only kind of weird rule that goes with this is we never use mono as the prefix on the first element. So if the first element has a subscript of 1, you don't use mono. You would use mono on the second element if the subscript is 1. And then the other rule that kind of goes along with this, the second element gets the ending of its name changed to "ide," to IDE. So you'll notice that it's always got an IDE at the end. So just a couple examples. Let's see. NH3. C2H6. What's one more? H2O. Let's do those. Okay, so NH3. There is 1 nitrogen. So if the subscript is 1, we don't use the prefix mono. So all you do is you say nitrogen. But there are 3 hydrogens. So for the prefix, I would say tri, and then I change the ending of the hydrogen name to "ide." And this just takes a little bit of practice to know where you're supposed to put the IDE. So this would be nitrogen trihydride. This guy is carbon, but there's 2 of them, so I do use the prefix for 2. I just wouldn't use the prefix if this was a 1. So I say di-carbon. You don't change anything about the first element's name. You just write it as it is with a prefix as necessary. And then for the second one, since this is a 6, I'm going to say hexa, and then hydride. And then for H2O, you know that is water, but the correct naming for it would be di hydrogen. The reason this isn't "ide" here is because it's the first element. You only ever change the second element to "ide." And then we got 1 oxygen on the second element. So this rule about using mono only applies to the first element. So since this is 1, I would use the mono, and then I change it to oxide. So that's how you go from a formula to a name. And then you just kind of reverse the process. So let me give you a couple of these others. Let's see, dinitrogen, sulfide. Let's try that one. So dinitrogen tells me that it's N, but there's 2 of them. And then octasulfide tells me it's S, but there's 8 of them. If I have something like carbon tetrachloride, carbon tells me the first element is C. The lack of prefix tells me that it's 1. Chloride is talking about Cl, and then the prefix tetra tells me 4. One more. Let's say nitrogen monoxide. The lack of prefix on the first element tells me it's only 1. Mon tells me it's only 1, and then oxide means just 1 oxygen. So I'm going to attach a naming practice assignment to this video, if you would complete that and then have that sent back to me. And then other than that, between the first 2 videos, you should be able to complete the UT Quest. If you need additional time on the UT Quest, please let me know. So it's in UT Quest as 4.1, I think. It's either 4.1 or 5.1. Can't remember. Thank you very much.